The first Thursday of every month, I always do question and answer. And this is my favorite meditation talk because A, I don't have to do any preparation at all. B, I like kind of hearing what's going on with people. What are you dealing with your meditation practice, with martial arts practice, with life, with whatever's going on? And sometimes I get like a really interesting question that I've never heard before. I remember after practicing for about a year, going to meditation probably every single Thursday with my Sifu, I asked this question. And I had thought about it for a while, and I was like, this, I'm pretty sure, is going to be a great question. And the question was, I'm going to paraphrase, it was something along the lines of, can you talk about mindfulness versus no mind? Like, we talk about no mind, Mushin. We talk about being mindful, like, paying attention. So, like, what's the difference between those? And my Sifu said, that's a great question. Come back next week and I'm going to do a whole talk about it. Every once in a while I get one of those, but after I did that, then I was always thinking to myself, oh, I got to come up with an even better one. If my Sifu doesn't say, that's a great question, I'm going to dedicate a whole talk to it, then it was pointless. Look, your questions can be whatever as long as it is related to something that I can turn into a meditation talk. Don't just ask me about like how to curl your toes up on a front kick. But if there's too much like ego in it and it's like, I'm trying to make this sound like I'm real smart, then that's not going to be a good question. If you're trying too hard, and like a lot of my questions after that were too much like about me. So whatever you're dealing with, and it's totally fine if it's about you, but asking the question should not be a chance for you to try to show off in front of anybody or me. So your questions, let's try to keep them concise and speak up so that I can hear you and the people at home can hear you as well. I've got already a hand raised at home from Frida. And I know Tanya's got one for me too. Go ahead, Frida.
My question is in regard to meditation. So now I've been meditating pretty regularly, and I'm just wondering, as you go through meditation or meditating, whether it's weeks, months, years, do you experience some kind of change that you actually can become aware of? Or is it does the change happen under your nose and the awareness of it maybe doesn't come till later on, or maybe it doesn't, you're never aware of it, but the change is somehow happening? Can you explain how that works with meditation?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, if you've been meditating regularly for a long time, that is wonderful. That in and of itself is a feat. Just anytime you can kind of dedicate yourself to something and stick to it, you're building better discipline and great habits and all of that. I do believe, in my experience and in most people's experiences of meditation, it's not usually going to be a whole lot of super dramatic, obvious changes that happen like that. Now, those do happen sometimes. And a lot of people, especially if you're talking about like the Buddha or somebody who's like a very influential prophet type figure, they've had some kind of experience like that, or at least they like to talk about their experience of meditation in that way because it makes it a much more interesting, exciting narrative. And I wasn't there. I assume the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for a long time and had like that enlightened experience, but it could have been like over years. And that's the way that it goes for most people, where it's not like you sit and meditate and on the regular, you're having these wow, aha moments that totally change your life forever. You might have some of those. And you might not. You might meditate for years and never have that one super dramatic moment. And that's totally fine. If you are searching for it and you're attached to that kind of thing happening, it's like the harder you try, the more attached you are to it, the less likely it's going to happen. So be totally fine with that slow kind of improvement or shift in your consciousness and your awareness. And if you do start to recognize it, it will likely be something subtle. maybe you will just think back on the way you were before you started meditating, and you can notice some kind of clear difference in your ability to focus or in your mood in general. I think that a lot of people will have this experience where maybe you haven't seen somebody in a little while and you've been meditating or doing a lot of, work on yourself, and then you see them again after a couple of years and they have the experience for you of, whoa, what have you been doing? You seem totally different. You seem so much more calm and peaceful. You seem so much more present, whatever it is. And that's also not something that you want to be attached to, because if you're always trying to seem super impressive and thinking of Zen around people just to get them to talk you up about your meditation practice, that's not going to work either. But that might be the way that it happens, is you have been gone for a while from somebody's life, and then you see them again and they notice in you. But meditation is, we think of enlightenment as being like that one big moment. Fireworks, you see something magical, behind the darkness of your eyes, and that changes you forever. And that might happen. Pretty common that people will get some kind of an experience like that actually does change them in a lasting way. But much more common and much more of a guarantee is little by little, you are shifting your consciousness, you are programming your mind just by practicing going back to the breath. Like our internal challenge this week is, whenever you have a negative thought, you just go back to the breath. And this is what meditation is. You're just practicing that when you're in the rest of your life, right? You have a thought, you let it go and go back to the breath. The more you practice that, the more easily it starts to happen, the more natural it is. And then really throughout your day, you are ending up more often or for longer kind of having this meditative state. So if you are, the short of this is, you've been meditating for a while, let's say. You've been meditating for what feels like forever. I mean, it's been several months, and you don't feel like you've really done it yet. Okay, great. Just keep going. A lot of your, the benefit for you is just going to be in the dedication and the discipline that you're getting from just sitting and meditating every day. But there are also more subtle things that are happening kind of under your nose, as you said, where you are just slowly but surely being able to focus more on the breath more often. You're being able to let go of extra thoughts and come back to the present moment more often for longer. And that's beautiful. That is the purpose of meditation on some level, is to just be present. And it doesn't have to be something big and dramatic. Anybody here have a question? Zelda? Like a yellow sash test? Anything more specific with that, or you want me to go with it? Yes. All right, I'll tell you. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm all that, because I'm not, but I am compared to how I used to be. And the short answer to your question is, your question being, how do you deal with stress? My answer is, I don't, because I have so much less stress than I used to. And before I started martial arts, I had literal physical signs of stress in my body, right? I had acid reflux, I had acne, I was actually just stressed quite a bit. And I wasn't even really aware of it until I started meditating. And after 6 months, that stuff cleared up and it was nice. And I'm not going to say, it would be ridiculous to say I never have stress, I never have anxiety. But when I look at the way that I used to be and the way that I just assume most people are before having a more dedicated practice where you're on the regular practicing this, it's insanity. And if I, back in the day would go a couple of days without having a decent meditation, I would start to feel like I'm going nuts. My brain is so busy and I have so many thoughts bouncing around in my skull, and that's not fun. But let's say that I'm looking at it from the way that was more the way that I was then, or just now. Let's say something really stressful is coming up. The reason that I don't have stress very often. It's not that nothing stressful happens to me. I have designed my life to try to avoid, super stressful things by just having a job that I love that is not super stressful, for example. But there's also just the practice, like years and years and years of just practicing letting go of unhelpful thoughts, anxious thoughts. Then what happens is I recognize them right away and I let them go. And I would not say that I'm, fully enlightened to the point where I never have those thoughts at all. I'm a human being and I have the thoughts and then I let them go. And sometimes they linger for longer. And sometimes I will like run it over and over and over again. And I had this experience when my mom passed a little bit ago where I was there with her in the room when she died. And I'm glad that I got to be there with her, but also it was quite traumatic to actually be there with my mom as she passed. Good. And there was a while after that, a good month or so, where I replayed that over and over and over and over and over again. And so it'll be something like that. That's like intense. And it can be something that is more objectively intense, or it could be something that is more just because I'm making it intense. It's intense for me. Yellow Sash is that, because you'll be fine. You'll survive. I'll tell you, by this time tomorrow, you'll feel great. But let's say that it's something that is kind of recurring, and I don't have the years of practice where I recognize the thought and I let it go. So what can I do today? Like, it's happening now. What do I do? So meditation, I would love to say will help, and it probably will, but you might just sit and have the thought, right? So maybe Tai Chi, where there's a little bit more involved there, or just a good martial arts class, something like tonight where you're going so fast and it's so intense that your mind doesn't have a chance to think about the thing that you were stressed about. That's great. It's one of the nicest things about a great intense class is you're so focused on what's happening now that your mind doesn't have a chance to focus on all the nonsense that you were stressed about before. And besides that, find something where you can really flow, right? There's something that I know you like to cook, to bake, maybe you do that, something that really takes you out of that kind of cycle. This is what stress is. Like a moment of stress is totally fine. The problem is the cyclical, never-ending thought that just keeps coming back. That's what you want to be able to let go of. And while it would be really nice to just be able to let go of that as soon as you recognize it, you might not recognize it right away, and it might be really incessant. So do something that you know is going to take you out of it. And then when you're done with that thing, it might come right back. So ultimately, I would say what works for me really well is I just logic myself out of it. I realize, like, I'm probably not going to die from this thing that I'm so worried about. And I can probably tell realistically that just sitting and worrying about it is not going to help. If there's something that you can do to prepare better, great. If you're stressed because you haven't written your paper yet, you should go home and write your paper. If you're stressed because you haven't read the book yet, you should go home and read the book. And after that stuff is done, just let it go and recognize that the worrying, the anxiety is almost guaranteed to be counterproductive. But don't go the next step, which most people do, and think like, oh no, well now I'm just worrying, and now I'm stressing myself out, and I'm making it even worse. And then you stress about the stress. That's just more of your brain, your ego, trying to hold on to this stressful state that it loves. Your ego loves stress. As much as that seems ridiculous, the ego loves stress because it's something that it can really, use to be in charge. Your ego wants these intense kind of emotional states because your ego is just craving that attention and that excitement. So just chalk it up to that. This is just my ego brain trying to be in charge, and I don't need to let that part of me be in charge. I can let my highest self be in charge by just letting it go. Good luck. Let's go to Tanya's. Give me at least the phrase. So you sent this to me before and I loved it.
Thank you, sir. I saw this today, and I mean, it was just posted recently by a poet that I really love, and it just stuck with me.
What's the poet's name again?
David White.
David White. How do you spell White?
It's with a Y.
White.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I read
So
a couple of things he sent me. He's really good.
Yeah, it's wonderful. This is just something he just thought of the other day and wrote it down and sent it out there. And it just stuck with me. I keep going back to it during the day, trying to understand what that means for me. But the statement is, what is immovable in us is always what moves most in the end. So if you can talk about that, that'd be great.
Yes. So I'm not going to lie to you. I had to read it 3 or 4 times before I got it. I was like, at first I read it like, what is most immovable in us ends up moving us the most in the end. And I was like, that can't be right. And then I read it again, and it was something else that was also not right. And then I read it the 3rd or 4th time, and I got it. And I'm paraphrasing, but what is the most immovable in us ends up moving the most in the end. And we can talk about the end as being death. We can talk about the end being some experience like enlightenment, a big shift where we move from one state to the next. And when I hear this, I'm thinking of more like a permanent shift, but it could also be a more impermanent shift, right? It might be something that you're holding on to and you have to let it go to, get into a higher state of consciousness or just to be less stressed. And you might have to keep letting go of it for a while. But let's talk about it like in terms of death or in terms of enlightenment, which I think are in many ways the same thing. Enlightenment is like an ego death. It is the death of the part of us that is really small and separate and is so like scared or thinks that we're just better than everybody else or whatever. That is essentially the same thing. And one of the reasons that meditation or that this kind of practice can be super scary for people is because it is similar to death, where you're just losing yourself. You're losing what feels like is, your most dear thing, this sense of who you are. And so what we hold on to the most, what we are attached to the most, is the very thing that we must let go of, and therefore has to like move the most in order for us to get beyond. And my Sifu, I'll give kind of a simple example or a silly example of this, but he liked to talk about, people ask him all the time about, Sifu, can you levitate? And like, can you do this or can you do that? Like kind of crazy thing that I've heard of that's possible. And his answer was always something along the lines of, no. And why would I spend so much time trying to do that? Because at the end of the day, it's just one more thing that I got to get over. If I could levitate, and it's like, I am so amazing, I can levitate. That's just something that my ego is going to have to get over, right? Now, some people would say like, no, not true, because in order to levitate, you would have to let go of your ego completely. Maybe, okay. But you get the idea behind this. So the things that we are so attached to are the things that keep us the way that we are. And you might really love the way that you are on some level, and then on another level or in some other way, you might think like, yeah, there's this thing that I'd really like to let go of though. It is that thing that you are the most attached to. And calling it a thing is kind of simplifying it in a way that might not be very useful. It's not like your car that you're super attached to. I mean, you can all conceive of a life without your car or your bike or however you get around. I can conceive of my life without the dojo. I don't want to. And this place and these people and this practice would probably be, for me, the thing that I am the most attached to, that I'd have to let go of until I have kids or whatever, and then I'll be really attached to them. But we want to recognize this, that there are these things in our lives that serve us really well up to a point. And very often these are the things, you know, the people, the ways of being that we have that we hold on to the most because we feel like this is what's kept me alive so far. So we hold on to it real tight. And that's great if you're great staying exactly the way that you are now. But if you can conceive of something beyond this, there will have to be some kind of letting go. And that's different from pushing away or resisting. It's just letting it go. And meditation should be a very useful tool for this. Of course, it's a meditation class. I'm going to keep talking about how important meditation is. But that is, you know, that is the practice of letting go, moment by moment, or of the big things. And enlightenment is like letting go of the big things, letting go of your sense of self. Doesn't mean that you are necessarily letting go of like your individuality. It's like letting go of what, you know, your small self is, this letting go of the ego. So in this way, I think this is a really, you know, really nice poetic way of looking at it and looking at the nature of our attachments is the things that we hold on to the most and the things that are the most immovable, the things that we feel like are such a solid part of us. It's like a mountain that will not ever disappear. That's the thing that's going to have to move the most in the end, because it's the very thing that stands in our way. So, you know, we talk about the 5 ways of becoming great at martial arts: patience, perseverance, practice hard, practice exactly what you want to perform, meditation. And I make this joke very often at the end of class when we're talking about these things, like you can't pick and choose which of these things you want to do. You have to be able to do all of them. And that picking and choosing is often because I like the idea of being patient, but I don't like the idea of practicing hard and having to push myself and having to like really work. And it's that kind of thing that you must be able to let go of. Let go of this small sense of yourself and just allow what is really there to kind of blossom. And sometimes it is going to feel like there's such a weight to it, such a gravity to it, that it's not going to even feel like a part of you. It's going to feel like who you are. And that is really what there is to let go of in the end, and that will move the most. And when it's gone, it's like you are, you know, looking, I don't know what's on the other side of the mountains over there, but we got these nice mountain ranges up here. And it's like you're really trying to see what's past it, but all you see is mountain, mountain, mountain. And you get used to that to the point where there's nothing beyond it. It's just a mountain. You can't possibly conceive of what is beyond it because it's all you've ever seen as far as you can remember. And then maybe someday there's an earthquake and the mountain disappears. More likely, it's like you're one shovelful at a time with that mountain. And then you can start to like get a peek over the top. And then eventually someday the mountain is gone and you can really see what's there. And that's not like super overstating what it might feel like to let go of that part of us that we're so desperately holding on to. You got to just let go of that thing by shoveling one shovelful of mountain at a time until it's gone. Any other question? Great, that was fine. So when we meditate, this is like doing the work, and it's great that it might feel like work sometimes, and sometimes you can just let go of this feeling that might become like resistance, right? The work is just practicing coming back to the breath. If we feel like you are taking a very easy shovelful with every breath, that's great. If you feel like every breath is like I'm moving a boulder and it's all I can handle and it's all resistance and it's like you're fighting against yourself and your brain, then that's not going to be a very, stress relieving activity, and it's probably not going to get you where you want to be. Ultimately, it has to be this letting go feeling. So we sit, and I'll go over posture in a second. But as we sit and breathe, remember each breath is a unique opportunity to just feel in the present. And you want to just, instead of trying to push away thoughts, you just focus on the breath. And this breath will only happen this one time. In your entire life and in the history of the universe, this breath will only happen this one time. It's perfect, it's beautiful, and there's nothing more exciting. So just sit, let go of whatever else the distractions are that are taking away from this breath. Sit completely. So I like to sit Seiza, kneeling. You can sit cross-legged. It's important to have your knees even or below your below your hips. If your knees are sticking up, your legs will fall asleep. Your hands are upturned together or separate, but not sliding down. So your shoulders are rolled back and relaxed. This is a great place to start, and you want to keep this position. If you recognize that you are constantly slouching in meditation, try to set out from the very get-go with a super strong posture. Not tense and rigid, but it is stacked and your shoulders are pulled back and it's solid. And then if you do notice that as you meditate, you're starting to lose it, you don't want to move around and shake yourself out of it. Just take a nice deep breath that does include the chest and just let that kind of straighten you back up into a good posture. Chin is parallel to the ground. Close eyes. Your eyes are upturned to the point between your eyebrows. And relax and watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. When your mind wanders, you can label the thought as thought without judgment. And just gently come back to the breath as many times as it takes.